Hey, brewery or small business owner. At the Beer Accountant, they understand the unique financial challenges of the craft brewing industry. Are you tired of navigating complex brewery accounting and taxes on your own? Staying up late working on financials and getting your finances in order after a whole workday? They're a CPA dedicated to helping breweries like yours thrive, with services ranging from qualified bookkeeping, business tax prep, to strategic financial planning. Stop wasting time on spreadsheets and focus on what you do best. Making great beer and running a small business, servicing over 50 breweries in 4 states. So if you own a brewery or small business, stop overpaying for reactive support and start being proactive with the Beer Accountant. Don't brew that IPA without this CPA. Visit beeraccountant.com to learn how their specialized expertise can help your brewery grow, profit, and succeed.
Are you a brewer looking to open, grow, or plan your next move? I'm Ted Zeller, liquor law attorney at Norris McLaughlin. I've spent my career working with breweries, helping them navigate the regulations that come with this industry at the municipal, county, state, and federal levels. From first permits to expansion into new markets, my team serves as legal counsel on licensing, compliance, and distribution. If you're ready to plan your next move or need legal guidance, I am here to help. Feel free to call me at 484-765-2220 or email me at tzeller@norris-law.com.
Oh, by the way, we just had Sam Calagione on. He said that when we bring up Stone, we have to ask you.
Okay.
He went and did a beer with you at some point, and he said that you guys had to pass him through a little hole that was broken in the there's like a gift shop that was a wall was broken.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys passed him through the wall to then throw out beers to everybody.
I don't quite remember that, but that sounds right. There is that was Saison Dubuff, and that was Sam and Greg and Bill Kovaleski from Victory that got together and brewed that beer, and they were crazy. We were trying to brew this beer while they were running around the brew house, and it was crazy. And so the Brewers at Stone came up with one of those hazard sandwich plates, the triangle thing.
Yeah.
And it just said, "Danger, collaboration, brewer in progress."
Welcome back to BrewedAt Podcast. I'm your host, Richie Tevlin, joined as always by Evan Blum.
Hello.
So today we have on the man who wrote the book, literally on IPAs, Mr. Mitch Steele.
Howdy.
Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
So first off, congratulations on the new gig. Now,
thanks. Appreciate it.
Brewmaster of Abita.
Yeah.
And then with that, with the kind of announcement of you, they also said that they're doubling production, I guess, next year.
They are. They're doing a lot of contract production, and they're looking to do some initiatives to grow their existing beer business. So a lot of exciting things happening.
I imagine like those two things are not kind of go hand in hand. It was like kind of bringing you on, and the expansion was probably something to do with each other.
Yeah, I imagine. They had been looking for a brewing department leader for a while.
Okay.
So they had been without for not quite a year.
Cool.
So they've been looking for a little while and wanted to find the right person, is the way they told me. So
there you go. They found the right person.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess how we do this most times is like kind of get to know you as a person, know you as a brewer. So I know you have a long history in beer, but I guess could we start at UC Berkeley? Is that?
I went to UC Davis.
UC Davis?
Yeah.
So we'll not start at Berkeley. We'll start at UC Davis.
Yeah.
Can we just start there and then just go through like kind of the quick history of your brewing history? Or how?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I went to UC Davis in the early 1980s, and I was a pre-science kind of undeclared major.
Yeah.
And, maybe thinking about veterinary school and that kind of thing. But I knew I wanted to do something science, and I needed to take a class my very first quarter. I got booted out, as the first incoming freshman get last choice, right? And I didn't get the class I needed. And somebody, one of the RAs in the dorm, recommended that I take Intro to Winemaking. And
how did that class not be filled up? I feel like everybody really class.
It's crazy. I don't think people really knew about it. But he told me, he said, "Look, if you go to Davis and you don't take this class, you're a fool." And so I took the class, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is science. This is art. This is agriculture. This is amazing," And So I kind of fell into winemaking. And then as I was starting to take the classes for that curriculum, I discovered there was a brewing science program as well. And so I did both. I studied winemaking and brewing science and graduated with a degree in fermentation science. But I think I knew in the back of my mind I always wanted to make beer.
But what year was this?
I graduated in 1984.
Okay.
And when I graduated, we were in a recession. None of the big brewers were really hiring, and the craft brewers were not really hiring either. There weren't that many. I mean, there's Sierra Nevada and Anchor, and then there were a couple others, and around the country. One of the guys that I went to school with was a first brewmaster at Bridgeport in Oregon. It was that time. And, so I ended up getting a job in the wine business, which was cool, and I enjoyed it until the company I was working for got sold to a larger company that wasn't interested in making really top quality wines. They were interested in lower end wine and volume, and just it just didn't hit me right. And so I was working there. I was in a town called.
Were you doing wine production? Or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was an assistant winemaker.
Okay.
At a large winery, but we had been trying to make some really nice wines, and then we scaled that back. And I was living in a town called Hollister, California, which is about 45 miles south of San Jose, inland from Monterey. And I read in the paper about a guy who was starting a brew pub, and this was probably 1987. In Hollister, in the town, and I had been looking at doing the same thing. And so I grabbed a phone book and looked up his number and called him up. And I said, I'd love to talk to you about this. I've been thinking about doing something like this. And we met. He showed me his place. It was almost all done by that time. It was a 14-barrel system, 2-vessel, JV Northwest, very manual system. But it was a neat old building. It was an old creamery. And he had named the brewery San Andreas Brewing Company. In San Andreas, the town of Hollister is known as the earthquake capital of the world. The Calaveras Fault and the San Andreas Fault run right through the center of town. And so they get a lot of small earthquakes, not a lot of big ones, but they get small ones all the time. And so it was kind of had that, that status as the earthquake capital of the world. So he themed his brewery after earthquakes and, seismic ale, and we had survivor stout, and we had earthquake pale ale, and, things like that, Richter scale ale. So it was fun. But I was moonlighting doing that, and I was brewing for him, coming up with all the recipes for him. And I lasted there about 4 years. Realized that he was never going to get to the point where he could afford to hire me full time. It wasn't going to grow that big. It was a pretty small operation, really a one-person operation. And so I decided to look for a job in the industry and get out of the winery I was at because I was unhappy there. And I applied to a bunch of breweries, got hired on by Anheuser-Busch in Fort Collins, Colorado. And moved out there. I told myself I'd spend 5 years at Anheuser-Busch, learn as much as I can so I come back out and work in a craft brewery and get back to what I love doing. But I ended up staying at Anheuser-Busch for 14 years.
What's the process like at Anheuser-Busch? Is it like kind of they need to bring you onto their system? Like, do you kind of like go back to brewing school with them?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They did things their own way, and they had some very unique processes that they used. So they taught you about all that. And it's a very German-themed brewing operation. So there was, even though they were using rice or corn, it was decocted and then pumped back into the main mash to raise the mash temperature up for conversion. They did a full-on lagering program and move the beer from tank to tank to tank. And it was, the technology in Anheuser-Busch was amazing. And I did enjoy it. It was hard work. But after 3 years in Colorado as a shift supervisor, I got promoted and moved to St. Louis and got put in charge of new products. I was part of a small team that was called the Specialty Brewing Group at the time. And we were doing, one of the fun projects I worked on was a re-release of beers that they had before Prohibition that had disappeared. And that was called the American Originals Project. And we did, we kind of made up.
What sort of beers were that?
So there was a porter.
Yeah.
There was a real nice Pilsner. There was a Dunkel, so German influenced beers, except the porter.
Was Anheuser-Busch, were they making those beers before Prohibition?
Yeah, these were actual brands that Anheuser-Busch produced. So we went into the archives and we're looking at all the advertisements for them and stuff.
Yeah, it's cool.
And excuse me, the Anheuser-Busch had an archivist on site who kept all the historical stuff, and he had this little booklet that was Adolphus Busch's recipe book.
Wow.
And it was about, it was like a 4x6 little notepad. And it had notes on the beers and didn't really say much, because they didn't really differentiate hop varieties and malt varieties and things like that. They just laid them out by origin. So it was California hops or Oregon hops or German hops. And, so we kind of had to figure out what those were.
What do you think, like, the California hops were?
Oh, they were Fuggles.
Okay.
Yeah. So California grew a lot of Fuggles and then also a lot of cluster back in the early 1900s. So that's what we tried to use.
And what about the German hops? Like, did Germany, was basically like one land race variety back then, just in Germany?
No, I think it was mostly Hallertau, and Tettnang. I mean, Anheuser-Busch was still using those hops when when they were brewing the regular beers. So,
okay.
There was a lot of connection to Germany with that company and the German hop industry. So it was pretty fun. We got to do some fun things, and then we moved on and did a series of Michelob specialty ales and lagers, and did a Pilsner and a Pale Ale and another porter, an American wheat ale, a Hefeweizen, German Hefeweizen.
Did these things get released commercially, or you guys were just exploring?
They got released commercially. They didn't do great. Anheuser-Busch is at such a scale that anything that doesn't sell a lot, people lose interest in very quickly.
Yeah.
And so when you're only selling 300 barrels a month and everything else is like 10,000 barrels a month, it's hard to compete, but the distribution network at Anheuser-Busch was asking for things because craft brewing was just starting to take off. There was a lot of competition. So anyway, I did that for 3 years and then went back into the breweries and became an assistant brewmaster and managed brew houses and fermentation cellars for them for a few more years before I left.
Cool.
It kind of probably got your taste back for the experimenting and.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was homebrewing a lot when I was at Anheuser-Busch.
Really?
Yeah, because I could, and I could get really cool hops and malts and things like that. But it was, brew beers like we couldn't brew at the main breweries.
Sure.
And I left in 2006 to join Stone. Stone had advertised for a head brewer, and my wife and I had just been out in San Diego a year before, and we liked it, and we're like, yeah, should I apply? And
how big was Stone at this point?
Stone was about 35,000 barrels.
So not really that big. I mean, regional, definitely big for their side, time, but
they were good size. They had just moved into a brand new brewery that was big, and they.
Oh, by the way, we just had Sam Calagione on. He said that when we bring up Stone, we have to ask you.
Okay.
He went and did a beer with you. At some point, and he said that you guys had to pass him through a little hole that was broken in the there's like a gift shop that was, a wall was broken.
Oh yeah.
And you guys passed him through the wall to then throw out beers to everybody.
I don't quite remember that, but that sounds right. There was that was Saison Dubuff, and that was Sam and Greg and Bill Kovaleski from Victory that got together and brewed that beer, and they were crazy. We were trying to brew this beer while they were running around the brew house, and it was crazy. And so the brewers at Stone came up with one of those hazard sandwich plates, the triangle thing.
Yeah.
And it just said, "Danger, collaboration, brewer in progress," and we'd put it out on the tour routes and everything when Greg was out there brewing with his friends.
Don't feed the collaboration brewers.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But it's I got to Stone and got to do some neat things, and spent 10 years at Stone. And
so you wrote the book for IPA.
Yeah.
Is this where you're really like affinity for, and like where you really nailed down the IPA style?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. I mean, I was an IPA drinker before I came to Stone. I drank a lot of IPAs when I was at Anheuser-Busch. My last few years at Anheuser-Busch, I was living in New Hampshire, and they had some craft brewers, but Massachusetts had a whole bunch, and we me and my friends, I was in a homebrew club there, and we would go to Massachusetts to get beer, because the New Hampshire selection wasn't always that great.
Yeah.
And and so I started drinking Stone beers because they were available in Massachusetts, and I remember buying bottles of Ruination and Stone IPA and Imperial Russian Stout and that kind of thing, and so I became a fan of their beers long before I joined them. And I was always an IPA guy. Once I tasted an IPA, I was kind of sold.
Yeah.
And that was probably back in the late 80s. When I was at San Andreas and was at a beer festival, and it was either Rubicon or Triple Rock. Rubicon was Sacramento and Triple Rock was Berkeley. Triple Rock's still there, but they had an IPA at a beer fest that I was at, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the hoppiest beer I've ever had in my life. This is wonderful. And yeah, that kind of set me down the road. But writing the book just solidified everything.
Yeah. And when did you write the book? It was at Stone that you wrote the book?
I was at Stone. The Brewers Association approached Stone about writing the book. And originally Steve Wagner, who was one of the co-founders of Stone, and I were going to write it together. And we said yes to the project. We did a few research trips to England. We got to go to Burton-on-Trent. We met with retired brewmasters from Bass and Marston's, and did a ton of research in England. Went to all these museums and looked up all these records, historical records and things like that. It was great.
Did any of that then transfer over to stuff that you're doing at Stone?
So right after the book was published, we did an anniversary beer. It was a 14th anniversary beer, and it was an English-inspired Imperial IPA.
Cool.
So we called it Imperial IPA, and it was essentially an 1800s IPA. I mean, we brought over the extra pale malt that they used back then. And, we brought in Simpson's malt as the base malt, and we used EKG hops, and we threw in a couple other English hops as well, but it was definitely inspired by all the research we had done.
That's cool.
And it was a great beer. It was one of my favorite beers we did at Stone, so it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is this the first book you've ever written?
Yeah.
How was the writing process?
Well, I break it down into 3 stages. So the research part was amazing, and we were just traveling around and taking notes, and I was reading a lot of publications here when I was at home, and and doing all that, and just taking notes and organizing the notes by chapters and doing all that. The writing part was okay. We had done a good job with our note taking. So it was really just capturing the things in our notes and making sure it kind of weaved together to tell a nice story, especially the historical stuff. But Steve and I were going to split the chapters in the book, and we were late with the manuscript, and I had been working on it, and I went to Steve's office, and we were going to have a meeting, and he said, before you say anything, I got to tell you something. And I'm like, what? And he goes, I haven't written a single word. And I'm like, oh no, what's going on? So, he offered to get a ghostwriter to finish the book. And I said, Steve, I've got all the notes here. I'm just going to power through it. And we talked to Brewers Publications and Christy Switzer, who was running it at the time, and just said, look, Christy, we've had a bit of a snag here, but I'm going to power through it. And so the last 6 months, I just sequestered myself at my office desk at home and wrote the rest of the book.
Wow.
And then the third part of the process was editing, and that was the worst part by far.
Was your original copy much longer than this, or was it organized differently?
No, it just was worded, things were worded differently. I tend to write how I speak, think, and some of the stuff apparently didn't make sense. I had to go back and rewrite it. We don't understand what you're trying to say here, kind of things. Or you could say it better if you do this or do that. So there were a lot of small, portions were rewritten, but a lot of small portions. And but yeah, it was overall it was a very rewarding process. I don't know if I have it in me to do it again, but
yeah, it's a lot. So the book came out in when, 2012?
2012, yeah.
Okay, so IPA, the evolution of IPA.
Yeah.
A lot has happened since then.
Oh, yeah.
The introduction of the hazy IPA. You probably could write a whole other book about like where it has gone come since then.
Yeah, and it'd be out of date just as quickly as this one was. Yeah,
exactly.
I thought about it. I've given it serious thought. I just don't know if I have the energy to do it again.
Yeah.
And it would require a lot of research, and visiting, most where the hazy IPAs originated, and up in New England, Massachusetts, and whether people would talk to me or not, because they've been, some of the brewers up there don't talk a lot about how they make them. But it's if the opportunity presents itself and I had the energy to do it and the time, I might do it. Yeah, I think it'd be fun.
When did hazy IPAs, did they come out and really get popular when you were at Stone's, or was that when
they were
New Realm?
just starting to become a thing when I was at Stone's? So
Okay.
I remember going to an event it was either Williamsburg or Richmond, Virginia, and so we were out there building our brewery, and somebody reached out to me that I didn't really know, who was very excited about the beers that she had brought, and they were treehouse beers.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that it was really quite the thing that it was. On being on the West Coast, you just didn't really see it. And I tasted these beers, and I'm like, wow, these are really different, And then Dean Rohan, who was at Treehouse at the time, the last time the Craft Brewers Conference was here in 2016. That was right when I was getting ready to leave Stone and go to New Realm. And he set up kind of a sit down with me to talk about their beers. And I tasted through a bunch of them. I said, these are wild. I've never tasted anything like this. And, but me having seen the coming and going of black IPA and white IPA and whatever other kind of IPA, that was going on back then, they all came and went pretty quickly. And I just figured hazy IPA was going to do the same thing. And obviously it didn't.
I think a lot of the brewers were telling themselves like, hey, this is just one of those things.
Yeah.
We've already been burned a couple of times trying to like spend all this time trying to come up with a new IPA, and it's not it.
Yeah, I was, an admitted skeptic of the lasting, the staying power of the hazy IPA. I was wrong, obviously.
Yeah.
But, yeah. And, it's funny, because a lot of people, when they started catching wind of these beers, would, call them lazy beers and the brewers being lazy and not.
They just don't filter it. Yeah.
Yeah. And once I had to brew one at New Realm, I was like, no, there's a lot to this. And it's freaking hard.
Yeah.
It's freaking hard to get the haze to be stable in the beer.
Yeah.
Anybody can make a hazy beer, but a lot of times they settle out, and so it was a learning process for me. It was kind of humbling, honestly. But I was able to call a few people and talk to them about how they made them and get some best practices and things like that, so that when we did do one in New Realm, it came out pretty good, and it became a number one selling brand. But I was slow to catch on, admittedly.
So how did like the New Realm transition happen? When did you transition over to New Realm?
It was 2016.
Okay.
There were two people who were ex-Anheuser-Busch people. I didn't know them when I was at Anheuser-Busch, but we had mutual friends.
Were they production people as well?
They were sales and logistics and distribution people. So, they were on the other side of the business. And they had decided, they left when the InBev buyout happened and had done some other things, but they wanted to start a brewery, and they got introduced to me by a mutual friend who was at AB. And they reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested. And at the time, my daughter was a sophomore in high school in California, and they were planning on headquartering the brewery in Asheville, North Carolina. And I was like, Asheville, North Carolina is pretty cool. I'd been there a few times. I like the city a lot.
Yeah.
But I said no. I can't move. My daughter's in high school, and I'm not moving her while she's in high school. And and I was not unhappy at Stone. I was still very happy at Stone and doing some neat things. So but they kept reaching out, and we kept talking. And then at one point, they offered to have me pay for me to commute and just fly out and work there, and then fly home on the weekends. And I decided to do it because I had never really, with the exception of San Andreas, which was already 3/4 of the way done when I got there, I'd never really been able to build a brewery from the ground up or build a brand. And it just felt like something that I wanted to do.
It's a different experience. You already worked at AB.
Yeah.
You got to see the craft. Now you get to like actually build one.
And the idea of getting back to the East Coast was attractive to me and my wife. And,
Yeah.
you know, so after a long period of thinking about it, I ended up taking the job. So that's how it happened. And I wanted to make sure that Stone's projects in Berlin and Richmond, Virginia were done up and running before I left. So I delayed, the start on with New Realm until those were up and running.
Cool.
Yeah.
And now your new gig, Abita.
New gig Abita, yeah. Well, the New Realm thing, lasted 9 years.
Yeah.
My position was eliminated, and I was retained as an advisor, so I still had some, input into things. But after a couple of months of, not really being active in a brewery, I wanted to get back.
Agent.
Yeah. And so, I was doing some consulting as well and some other things. And I took some time to, do a little thinking and trying to figure out exactly what it is I wanted to do. And, after a couple of months, I realized it was being in a brewery and working with a team of brewers and, getting everybody better at what they do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So are you living down where Abita's in
New Orleans.
New Orleans, right?
It's outside of New Orleans.
Okay.
It's on the north side of Lake Pontchartrain, and New Orleans is on the south side. So it's like a 25-mile across the lake, and there's a big bridge that goes across there. I think it's the longest bridge in the world. At least I've heard.
It's pretty long.
Yeah, it's a long bridge, but it's a beautiful area. There's several towns on the North Shore. A lot of nice little restaurants on the shorefront and on the lake shore. And the neighborhoods are nice and people are nice. And, we went down there. I brought my wife down with me when I interviewed because I wanted her to see the area and make sure she was okay with it. Because we were happy in Atlanta. I wanted to stay in Atlanta. And, after I interviewed and realized that I think the job was going to be a really good fit for me, she had been exploring and, she got with a realtor and looked at a couple of houses to see what was out there. And she came back and said, yeah, I'd like to do this. So, yeah, that's how it happened.
Nice. So when did you officially start there?
March 30th.
Wow, it's very, very soon.
Yeah, and I've been doing some traveling and commuting and things like that. So I've really only worked like 5 or 6 days at the brewery. So yeah.
How is it getting to know the team and everything? Is it mostly just
good?
Kind of getting
They've got some great people on the team. Some of the people have been there for decades, right? And they know the business, and that's really neat. And then some other people, some of the brewers, all the brewers have been there more than 4 years. So, they don't have a lot of turnover. Yeah. Right. And they're good, but they haven't had the opportunity to do learning and really, kind of understand why things are done the way they are, as far as quality control and process optimization and things like that. So I get to do some of that, which will be fun. Yeah.
Where do you think, you've covered so many different spots across your career. Is there one spot and specifically you're saying like this is kind of where you cut your teeth? Is that AB, or is it just you've learned a little bit and each place has been so different?
Yeah, I've learned a lot everywhere, and I've always, I'm one of those people that's really curious, and I've always told myself if I stop learning in a job, I'm not in the right job.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, I think Anheuser-Busch, I learned more about beer styles when I was at Anheuser-Busch because I had to do it because nobody else there knew anything, and so this was right when the internet was coming out, in the mid 1990s. And so I did a lot of research. I bought a lot of books. I read a lot, took a lot of notes, put together presentations for the people at Anheuser-Busch on beer styles. And, we did a lot of work trying to teach Anheuser-Busch about some of the different beer styles that were out there. We pilot brewed a lot of them in case the marketing team ever decided they wanted them. So that was, Anheuser-Busch also, just as far as project management and process management and consistency from beer to beer to beer, all of that is really critical to them. And so I learned a lot about all that, which really helped me when I went to Stone. At Stone, at Stone, I learned the craft beer ethos. It was full on.
Stone is like so
100%.
hardcore about that.
Yeah.
Was that a hard transition when you went from?
No, it wasn't hard at all. I loved it. Yeah, it's funny. I just like, oh my gosh, this is the real deal. These guys are authentic. They're real. They believe it. They believe everything that they say, and I'd still believe that.
Yeah.
When Greg would get out there and preach to people, and he was saying what he believed. And he wanted people to drink good beer, and he wanted people to eat good food and not buy, commodity food and not buy commodity beer. And if we weren't being creative, we weren't being successful. And it was a remarkably fun environment to be as a brewer. And honestly, I just to call out Steve Wagner, I got on board. He immediately gave me creative freedom. When we were doing, old standbys like Old Guardian barley wine or the Imperial Russian Stout, he said, "You want to change it? Go ahead and change it. Let's see what happens." And that was kind of his attitude towards it. He just wanted to know what I was doing and and I didn't want to change the old school core beers,
Yeah.
But he was pretty open when I wanted to brew something. I think the only time he ever said no was when I wanted to do a rye IPA for an anniversary beer. And he just sat there and kind of scratched his head and he goes, but I really don't like rye beers. And I'm like, all right, we'll do something else. So that was great. And Greg, it took a long time for Greg to trust me as a craft brewer because of where I came from.
Yeah.
So he was always trying to trip me up. And his first response was always no. And then he'd think about it. And sometimes he'd say yes and sometimes he wouldn't. But, the amount of creative freedom I had as Stone was something I've never had before or since. As far as what we released, it's been awesome. It was awesome. But learning how craft brewers operated, how we sold beer, how the importance of having an experience when you come into the brewery and, having on-site experiences and things like that. I think that's really what I took from Stone. And plus everything I learned brewing all the beers that we brewed, which was, we were very intensely into innovation, whether it was new hop varieties or new malts or new yeasts or whatever. If there was something new that came out, we tried it and we wanted to see what
it was built into the culture.
Yeah, it really was.
Start.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that might have been half an hour.
Yeah, I think we're probably at our time.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I talked too much.
No, that's perfect. We're just trying to get so many people in for CBC.
Yeah.
But how is CBC treating you in Philly? When was the last time you were here?
Philly, 2016.
The last one?
Okay. Yeah. So no, it's great to be here. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's a whirlwind because I'm trying to deal with a move and my wife is packing right now. I'm going to leave tomorrow morning. I was going to stay for the whole thing and I can't.
No, you got too much stuff going on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Of course.
We had a great time and it was an honor to get you in here.
Yeah, thanks.
The man himself.
Appreciate it.
Cool.
Yeah, hopefully we get to do this again sometime. Good luck.
Definitely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anytime you're in town.
You can find us at BrewedAt, at the BrewedAt podcast, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.